Have you ever spent years building something with your own hands, only to have someone come in, say it was worthless, and try to take it away from you as if your spirit had never been woven into it? Have you ever felt that dull ache? The ache of disrespect that runs deeper than betrayal, and wondered what would happen if the truth finally came out and demanded to be seen? Some say revenge is loud, but sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply letting the consequences play out as written. So let me ask you this before we begin. What would you do if the very system they tried to destroy you ended up being the one thing they couldn't survive without? This is my story. A story of pride, silence, resilience, and the moment when everything turned against those who thought I was powerless. If you have time, sit down with me. Listen to what happened. Because the storm that began with a whisper ended with a reckoning they never saw coming. My name is Iris Greyfeather. I am 37 years old, a senior systems architect, and a woman born and raised in the red-dusted valleys of northern Arizona. For 11 long years, I was the quiet heartbeat behind SkyRail Logistics. People in the company used to joke that our servers breathed only when I breathed, and sometimes I believed it myself. I built our central platform, HawkFlow, line by line, shaping it the way my grandfather shaped cedar carvings, one patient stroke at a time. HawkFlow carried the company through every storm, through supply chain shutdowns, through chaotic winters, and especially through the brutal 2028 blizzard that swallowed half the Midwest and froze every major competitor in place while we kept moving. For years, my work spoke louder than my presence, and I was fine with that. I never expected applause. I only wanted respect for the craft. But the morning Caleb Northwood walked into SkyRail, all polished confidence and restless ambition, I felt the air shift. He was 34, young, sharp in his suits, and he moved with the energy of a man convinced the universe had already chosen him for greatness. He spoke in fast bursts about hyper-scalable AI clusters and future-proof microengines and treated these ideas as if they were sacred visions no one else could understand. The trouble was not his enthusiasm. It was the way he looked at me, like I was a relic from another age, a reminder of a past he had come to wipe away. He did not know me. He did not know what I owned. And he certainly did not know the code he was so eager to replace was the very code that held the company's lifeline in my hands. As I watched him parade through the department with that confident stride, something in me stirred, not fear, but the quiet beginning of a storm I knew he would never see coming. Caleb never once asked how HawkFlow came to exist. He never asked why no one else in the company dared to touch its core without me standing beside them. He simply assumed SkyRail owned everything behind their glossy dashboard, and that assumption was the first crack in the path he was walking. What he did not know, what he could not have imagined, was that years before he arrived, I made a promise to myself. I had watched too many creators hand over the work of their spirit only to be forgotten once their usefulness was spent. My grandmother used to say, "Do not give away the tools your hands carve, or you give away your future." Those words echoed in me the year HawkFlow was born. Before writing the first line of code, I formed my own company, Greyfeather Logic, a small but solid LLC that existed for one purpose: to protect the software and the work that shaped my life. I did not sell HawkFlow to SkyRail. I licensed it. The company did not own it. They rented it from me the same way one rents land that does not belong to them. The contract was clear, written carefully with the help of a patient attorney who understood the value of intellectual sovereignty. Quarterly license fees. Automatic invoicing. A grace period, but only one. If the contract was broken, the system would revert to a protected state until the vendor resolved it. That vendor was me. For nearly a decade, the company honored the agreement without question. Executives came and went, but the system remained steady because I kept it steady. Then Caleb arrived, full of certainty and full of pride, and he ignored the invoices that kept everything running. He believed I was only an employee. He never realized I was also the landlord of the very ground he stood on. The first sign of trouble was subtle, almost polite, the way a storm begins with a single shift in the wind. I noticed meeting invites that normally appeared like clockwork suddenly vanished from my calendar. At first, I brushed it off as a scheduling mistake. Skyrail was busy, and people often forgot to include everyone. But then code reviews were reassigned. Architecture sessions continued without me. Decisions were made behind closed doors that once required my guidance. It felt like someone was quietly pulling threads from a web I had spent 11 years weaving. Caleb framed it as progress, a modernization effort, something bold and visionary that would liberate the company from legacy systems. I listened to him speak those words, knowing full well he did not understand a single cathedral-like structure inside Hawkflow. But his confidence was infectious to people who did not know the difference between innovation and carelessness. He moved quickly, too quickly, like a man trying to replace the foundation before understanding how the building stood. My system access was the next to go. One morning, I logged in and found my permissions temporarily suspended due to restructuring. Drew Holloway, a good engineer but inexperienced, tried to tell me it was a technical glitch. I could see in his eyes he did not believe the words coming out of his own mouth. The truth was simpler. Caleb was removing me piece by piece, thinking that if he stripped away enough of my presence, the company would forget the code was never theirs. The worst moment came when the automated license invoice was ignored. It should have triggered questions. It should have been paid. Instead, it was dismissed as a duplicate billing issue, as if my work was some small clerical error. They believed my retainer salary meant they owned every line I had ever written. They forgot what the contract said. And Caleb, in his arrogance, never bothered to read it at all. The day they finally pushed me out did not feel explosive or dramatic. It felt strangely quiet, like the air right before lightning touches the ground. Caleb summoned me to a glass-walled conference room, the kind designed to look transparent but used mainly to hide decisions made by people who believed their titles made them wise. He sat at the head of the table, fingers tapping, eyes bright with the kind of confidence that grows faster than wisdom. When I stepped inside, he smiled as if he had already solved a problem the rest of us had not recognized. "Iris," he said, leaning back in his chair, "we are moving into a new era here at Skyrail. One built on modern systems, modern thinking, and modern leadership." His tone was smooth, almost rehearsed, and I could feel resentment simmer beneath my ribs, not because he wanted change, but because he spoke as if I had never carried this company through its darkest nights. Then came his final flourish. "We will no longer be needing your role. Your system was impressive in its time, but that time is over." He slid an envelope toward me with a termination letter and an attached non-disclosure agreement. The gesture was dismissive, almost casual, as if 11 years of loyalty could be folded into a single sheet of paper. I picked it up, turned it over, and let him talk. When he paused, I tried, calmly and professionally, to remind him of the vendor contract, the unpaid license, the legal relationship Skyrail had with Greyfeather Logic. He laughed, actually laughed, and said, "We own everything you built. This is just a formality." I tucked the NDA into my bag without signing. I handed over my badge, thanked him for the opportunity, and walked out of the building with my contract secure in my coat pocket. He believed he had closed a door. He had no idea he had opened another one entirely. When I arrived home that evening, the desert sky was turning the color of cooled embers, a quiet reminder that endings sometimes glow before they fade. I set my bag on the kitchen counter and stood for a moment in the stillness of my house, letting the disappointment settle in my chest. I was not broken. I was not defeated. But I was wounded in a way that only betrayal can cut, slow and deep. My grandmother used to say, "When a door is slammed in your face, the wind that comes through the cracks will tell you what to do next." I could feel that wind already stirring. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and logged into the private administrative console for Hawkflow, the one Skyrail never had access to because it existed entirely within Greyfeather Logic. The interface greeted me with a calm, familiar pulse. I navigated to the license status page, the one I had checked only a handful of times over the years because the company had always paid on time. But there it was, undeniable and glowing red. License invoice unpaid. Grace period expired. Support contract void due to termination of the designated architect. For a long moment, I simply breathed, letting the weight of that reality shape itself around me. I had not built Hawkflow to punish anyone. I built it to protect itself, to protect the work of my hands. And now the system was doing exactly what it was designed to do. Skyrail had broken the contract. They had fired the only authorized maintainer. They had ignored the invoice that kept the platform alive. My hand hovered over the toggle that controlled enforcement mode. Strict enforcement. A simple switch, a measured response. No malice, no revenge, just the natural consequence of neglect. I clicked it, setting the change to take effect on Monday at 7 in the morning. Then I closed my laptop, stepped outside into the cooling night air, and let the desert wind carry away the last pieces of doubt. Monday arrived with the crisp quiet that only comes before trouble. I was sipping my coffee on the porch, watching the first sunlight stretch across the sandstone hills, when the first message appeared on my phone. It was a short alert from one of my old team members, Drew Holloway, sent at exactly 7:15 in the morning. Iris, something is wrong. Hawkflow is not responding. I could feel the tension beneath his words, even through the text. I set my coffee down and waited, knowing the real storm had not yet reached its peak. At 7:30, another notification flashed. This time it came from someone I barely knew in warehouse operations. All systems down. Error code says license expired. Is this your doing? I did not reply. There was nothing to explain. The contract had spoken for me. Skyrail had made their choice when they refused to honor the agreement. By 7:45, the messages came faster than I could read them. Dispatch logs were frozen. Delivery routes stalled mid-update. Inventory scanners refused to authenticate. Payroll integration crashed entirely. Hawkflow had shifted into its default protective state, locking every operational channel until the company addressed the unpaid license. Inside the glass towers of Skyrail, I imagined the chaos unfolding. Screens glowing with identical warnings, managers scrambling for explanations. Technicians attempting frantic workarounds, none of which would succeed because the lockout was embedded at the core. This was not sabotage. This was the system doing precisely what it was built to do when mishandled. And now, the consequences fell not like a hammer, but like an avalanche that had been building quietly behind them for weeks. By 8 o'clock, I knew Caleb would be looking for someone to blame. I knew his certainty would splinter into panic. I knew the call was coming. And I knew I was ready for it. The call came at 8:19 in the morning, vibrating across my kitchen counter like a trapped bee. I stared at the screen for a moment, watching Caleb's name flash in bold letters. A part of me wondered how long he had paced the halls before dialing. I answered with a steady voice, one shaped by years of holding crises together. His voice, however, was cracked and frantic, stripped of the confidence he had worn like armor. Iris, what did you do? Hawkflow is down. Nothing is working. Warehouses are frozen. Drivers are stuck. Tell me how to fix this. I listened without interruption, letting his panic run its course. When he finally stopped to breathe, I spoke with calm clarity. Caleb, I did not do anything. The system responded to a broken contract. You terminated the licensed architect. You ignored the invoice. You cut off your own access. There was a long silence, the kind that stretches when truth finally pierces denial. Then he snapped back, voice sharp with accusation. Do not play games with me. This is sabotage. You planted something. You set a trap. I let out a slow breath. This is not a trap. It is a vendor enforcement action. A landlord changes the locks when tenants stop paying rent. That is all that happened. His breathing grew uneven, a mix of disbelief and anger. I could almost see him standing in the server room, eyes wide, realizing just how little control he truly had. For a man who believed he owned the future, he had never bothered to read the past. Before he could answer, another voice cut into the call. It was the CEO, Marla Donovan, her tone tight and strained. "Iris," she said, "we need to talk." Immediately. And just like that, the call shifted from panic to desperation, the kind born when a company finally realizes the ground beneath it is no longer its own. Marla Donovan's voice carried the weight of someone who had not slept, someone who had realized too late that the foundation she trusted was slipping beneath her feet. "Iris," she said again, slower this time. "We need your help. Everything is down. We cannot ship. We cannot process. We cannot function. Please tell me you can restore hawk flow." Her words were steady, but underneath them I heard the strain of a leader watching her empire turn to sand. I stepped outside onto my porch as she spoke, letting the calm morning air ground me before I answered. "Marla," I said, "Hawkflow is enforcing the contract that SkyRail agreed to. You stopped paying the license. You terminated the only authorized architect. The system is doing exactly what the terms require." She sighed, a long breath that sounded like defeat. "Then tell us what you want. Tell us what it will take to bring everything back." Her tone shifted, gliding toward negotiation, toward diplomacy shaped by desperation. For a moment, I remembered the years I had protected SkyRail, the nights I stayed awake patching issues that no one else could solve, the winters I carried their operations while storms shut down entire regions. A small part of me grieved what we used to be. But grief could not erase what they had done. I spoke clearly, not unkindly, but with the firmness of someone who had reclaimed her own power. "I will not return as an employee. I will not sign your non-disclosure. I will not maintain Hawkflow under your leadership." There was silence. Then her voice returned, thinner now. "Then what are you offering?" I answered with the calm finality of someone who knew her worth. "SkyRail may purchase full ownership of the Hawkflow codebase for $3.2 million, or you may begin building a new system from the ground up. Those are the only options." Behind her quiet breathing, I could almost hear the world collapsing around them. The choice was hers, but the path forward belonged to me. The hours that followed felt strangely calm for me, even as SkyRail scrambled behind the scenes. I knew the contract. I knew the weight of every clause and every signature. And I knew they would try to find a way out before accepting the truth I had laid before them. Sure enough, at 10:30 that morning, I received a call from Elias Stone, the company's corporate attorney. His voice held a quiet professionalism that told me he had already read the agreement front to back. "Ms. Greyfeather," he said, "I have reviewed the documents. Your position is legally sound." He paused, as if measuring the full depth of that reality. "SkyRail is in breach. You are fully within your rights to enforce the shutdown." I thanked him for the acknowledgement, though a part of me sensed he wished this situation had been placed in someone else's hands. By noon, the executive board had met in emergency session. I imagined them sitting in that long oak conference room, the same room where Caleb once dismissed my work with a wave of his hand, now realizing the system they depended on was never theirs to command. When Marla called again, her voice carried a different tone. The resistance was gone. Only acceptance remained. "Iris," she said quietly, "the board has approved the purchase." At 12:17, I received the notification from my bank. $3.2 million. Cleared. Final. Irrevocable. For a moment I closed my eyes, letting the truth of it settle into my bones. Not triumph, not revenge. Just justice, clean and simple. I reopened my laptop, logged into the private administration console, and lifted the enforcement lock. Hawkflow hummed back to life instantly, steady and strong, as if it had only been resting. Within minutes, Skyrail's operations returned to motion. Trucks moved. Orders processed. Systems breathed again. But the balance had shifted permanently. They had bought the code. I had reclaimed my future. And the chapter that bound us together was finally closing. In the weeks that followed, life unfolded with a clarity I had not felt in years. For the first time since joining Skyrail, I woke without the weight of their emergencies on my shoulders. No late-night alerts. No frantic calls. No quiet dread that someone would try to tear apart what I had built. Instead, I spent my mornings watching the sunrise melt across the desert horizon, letting myself breathe in the freedom I had earned. The payout did not change who I was, but it reminded me of something I had forgotten. My work, my time, and my spirit had value long before anyone tried to diminish them. It was during one of those quiet mornings that I received a call from Apex Freight Systems, Skyrail's fiercest competitor. Their director had heard about the shutdown, the contract, the legal victory, and most of all, the system that had carried an entire corporation for more than a decade. He spoke with respect, not entitlement, and asked if I might consider joining them to build something new from the ground up. Something faster, something sharper, something entirely mine. I accepted, not out of spite, but out of the certainty that growth comes from moving toward opportunity, not away from pain. At Apex, I built Falcon Route, a modern platform crafted in Rust, lean and powerful, shaped with all the wisdom I had gained from Hawkflow's years of service. Within 12 months, Apex overtook Skyrail in regional market share. Their efficiencies soared. Their operations glided. And Skyrail, unable to keep pace with its aging infrastructure, began to falter in ways they could no longer hide. As for Caleb, word quietly spread that he had been moved into a role with no real authority, his title preserved but his influence hollow. I did not celebrate that. Life has its own way of teaching lessons, and pride often writes its own downfall. I bought a small cabin near the river where I grew up, a place where the wind carries old stories across the water. And when I sit by the fire at night, I remind myself that my journey was never about revenge. It was about sovereignty, dignity, and remembering that no one can claim what your own hands and spirit have created. And now I ask you, the listener of my story, what would you have done if you stood where I stood? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I always read them, and your voice matters here. If there is anything my journey taught me, it is this: when you know your worth, you do not have to shout. When people try to erase your work, stand your ground. And when someone treats your creation like it is theirs to command, remember that truth and preparation are stronger than pride and arrogance combined. Some storms we do not choose, but every storm reveals who we truly are. Now I want to ask you, what lesson did you take from this story? Have you ever been underestimated, disrespected, or pushed aside the way I was? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your experiences matter, and your voice might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.